Sorry, can you see it? Oh, I see it. I can see it. Okay. It's not there, is it? Is it? Oh, there. Okay. You better put it in the folder afterwards. There we go.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. So just to say, I'm the Communications Manager for the Valuing Nature Network. So before I start, I want to make a big disclaimer that I haven't done the primary research. This is research from at least 10 different projects that are run by academics in different universities, and each of the projects had many, many people involved. So this is not my primary research. Also like to say that Steve and Roy, who've just spoken, are also on the management team for the Valuing Nature Network. So difficult questions, I might call you in. So just to have a quick overview about what I'm going to talk about. Hopefully I'll be quite quick, shouldn't be too long. The concept of why value nature, just go through that quickly. What the services are that nature provides. Then the work on how to understand and then value these services. I'm going to give a couple of examples from the Valuing Nature Network projects, and along the way talk about how this information could then be used in decision making. Okay, so we've discussed that, everyone's talked about this, but we know that there's an intrinsic value to nature, so wildlife, scenery, bees that provide honey, etc. And there's also the underlying natural cycles, so water, soil, etc. Been discussed endlessly, and the concept of why we would want to put a value on those things. So if anyone was here in Etch's talk earlier, it's about putting a value on changes. So it's not about an absolute value for a tree or a bird. It's about you've got a situation and you want to make a change. What is the change in that value? And how do you actually put a value onto that? And indeed, why would you want to put a value onto it? So the reason is that because resources are targeted in a whole number of ways. So we know that environment has value, but some of these other things have value: housing, healthcare, education, food, of course. And these are valued, and we know quite a lot about how they're valued. Generally, they're valued in money. So they've got a straightforward, equivocal value terms. So just bearing these concepts in mind, now going to turn to the Valuing Nature Network. So for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's a network, we've got over 1,200 members in over 40 countries, and anyone is free to join. So it has both academics, about half academics. We also have NGO organisations, policy people and business people involved. And this was, so anyone can sort of join up and understand and take part and hear about what we're going to do, or the research that's going on. Can you tolerate another conceptual framework? Let's go through it quickly. The important thing is that wherever you start, it's all tied up together. So starting in the top left, we've got the drivers of change, political, socioeconomic, environmental drivers. We've got the natural resources and the ecosystem services that stem from them. And then, together with other capital, for example, manufactured and human capital, these produce goods which people want to use. So these go through these various sort of groups, and obviously we're interested in the valuation, which can be economic, health valuation, shared social values, so using monetary and non-monetary assessments. So once you've done that sort of valuation, the outputs can then be put back into decision making, which then feeds back into regulation, which then feeds back into the drivers. So this was a concept which the Valuing Nature Network projects came up with fairly early in the research, and it just provides a framework for people and to sort of organise their work. So there were 10 projects within the Valuing Nature Network. As I said, they're run by different universities. I'm not going to talk about them all. I've picked out 3 just to focus on. So first one about coastal services, second one about peatlands, and just a quick mention about the business opportunities from the natural environment. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the Valuing and Managing Coastal Zones project. And this is work that's led by Professor Kerry Turner at the University of East Anglia. And his team actually involved about 60 different people. So each of these teams involved economists, social scientists, natural scientists, and also involved often NGOs and policy people as well, to try to get all those people working together at the same time. As you're probably aware, I've looked at some facts and figures I think I got from Kerry's work. So coasts, I think was mentioned earlier this morning. They are about 20% of the land area, but apparently about half of the population lives around the coast, and that's 75% of the world's major cities. So managing coastline is really important, and obviously they're not important just for human use, but they have biodiversity, habitat use as well. And the important thing is that coastal zones are changing. They're one of those environments where they're under a lot of change, so they need to be well managed. So Kerry's team came up with a decision support system. So this is a way of looking at coastal zones and a way to help decision makers understand both the processes and help them to use that in their decision making. So it started off, as we've heard earlier, about structural processes like the biophysical underpinning of the system, the services that come from that, both intermediate and final services, and the goods and the benefits that come from them. On the next slide, I'll just go through that in a bit more detail. But this then should feed into the decision support system, where they're using a range of things, so scenarios, as we've heard about, indicators and models, and the actual valuation. Okay, so what the group did was to really break down the whole of the system and pull out all of the potential services and goods that were in there. So I won't go through them all, but starting from the left, it's the sort of underpinning, so the actual sort of physical processes. Then you get your intermediate services, and these are broken down into supporting, regulating, cultural services in different colours. And then they go into the final services, which then lead into the actual goods and benefits. So all of that, I'm sure, sounds very obvious. You know, it's nothing perhaps, totally new, but it's what do you actually do with all that information? I've skipped the valuation part of this because I forgot to say that a lot of this work is actually now being carried out under the National Ecosystem Assessment work, which won't be ready to publish until March. So some of this, the details of it, unfortunately, can't talk about yet. But I did want to talk to you about the details of the decision support system, because this is something that could be applied not only to coasts, but to other areas. And the idea is, looking from left to right again, is that the system on the left can be used in where it is relatively simple environments or situations, and where you've got what Kerry's calling complex and contested situations, such as often in coastlines where you've got a lot of different people who all want who value it in different ways and want different things from that coastline, you can use different methods. So the simple method might be to do an initial scoping exercise. This is going down the ones on the left. Cost-benefit analysis, that's the valuation side. Using macro efficiency criteria and economic welfare looking at the national economic scale, and then somehow looking at a distribution of gains and losses in that analysis. Going to the other side, where you're looking at a very complex system, you might want to use deliberative methods, taking into account environmental standards and ethics, looking at the loss of shared value assets, and then you might, as Roy was talking about, you might want to then put that through some sort of deliberative stakeholder experts forum to get different opinions. So that was the coast one. I'm just going to now leap to a different project. This was the project led by Mark Reed, who's at Birmingham City University. And this work was about valuing and restoring peatlands. Now again, peatlands have a lot of services that they provide. So they capture carbon, they provide water regulation services. Water stays up in the peatlands, doesn't flood so quickly. So what Mark's team did was that they actually went out with so again, using economists, natural scientists, social scientists, going out in the field and actually meeting the landowners, water companies, the farmers, the people who actually use and manage that land, to discuss what their values were. So different people come up with different values. And one thing that's very clear is that peatlands are degraded. So they're suffering from erosion, they're not actually acting as well as they could be. So Mark did a whole load of different work, and I'm just going to focus on one aspect. And this was the potential for using a market approach to get some money to restore the peatlands, which I don't know, people may already be familiar with this. It's fairly recent work. Just like to say that's done under the IUCN, so it's not just the Valuing Nature Network project, it's under a bigger project under the IUCN. So basically, they're saying because peatlands, they give a whole range of services, but how do you actually get some money to maintain those services? So the way that they're looking at that is to use a market price for the service of carbon capture, so specific service. Obviously, if you pay for carbon capture, the peatland will deliver those other services as well, such as the water and the biodiversity benefits. Now, this hasn't happened yet, so I'm not saying this is happening, but this is a potential where carbon credits could be made available. Those carbon credits could be sold, and that would be under a specific system. And then either individuals or businesses could then buy those credits, and the money would be then put back to the landowners for restoration and re-wetting of the peatlands. Now, I did try to look up the actual today's market value of the carbon cost, but I couldn't find it. But I think it's around £4 or £5 at the moment. So this work says that, that's quite a low price for carbon. It would have to increase quite a lot, maybe to £20, in order to be able to restore peat over 25 years, so to actually have a long-term impact. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the final example. I had to choose some of the projects, so I just thought I'd choose 3. This is the business opportunities from the natural environment. Do I have a title? Oh, no. Sorry. So this work was led by Guy Duke, who is an independent consultant, and the work was for the Ecosystem Markets Task Force, which was actually a DEFRA initiative. And the idea was to see what the business opportunities from the natural environment might be. And so Guy's work looked at all the potential business activities and then ranked them with regards to their market benefit, so how much they might generate, and also their potential biodiversity impact, so their improvement. And so I haven't remembered them all, so these icons are just to remind me. So number 1, which was jointly, 2 were put in first place, was biodiversity offsetting and conservation banking. And this was jointly put in place with that peatland restoration work that I just talked about. And that was viewed to be the top opportunity from the natural environment. Other ones included wood fuel, developing the knowledge economy, carbon capture in carbon neutral homes, the sheep are the payment for ecosystem services, sustainable tourism, water reuse, and environmental bonds. So just throwing that in there, the findings were then put to government via the Ecosystem Markets Task Force, and the idea was that it should stimulate both for business opportunities and for government to look at the regulatory either restrictions or areas where they should open up to help that to happen. Right, I've obviously been talking very quickly because I'm very near the end, you'll be pleased to know. So I mentioned that pretty much all of those original projects in the Valuing Nature Network have come to an end. A lot of the research is still coming out, so I'm still advertising that as it comes out. But just to let you know that there will be another phase of this research, a bigger phase. The Natural Environment Research Council have committed funding to this, and we're expecting the call to come out in hopefully next month. So specifically, if you're an academic and you're looking for funding in this area in the future, there will be money coming out, and the call should be out hopefully next month. If you want to keep up to date with this and don't need to keep looking back at the website, you can actually join. So if you go to the website, it's valuing-nature.net. Go to the top left to the join, and then you can fill in your details, and I'll email you when there's more information. And that's it. Thanks.
Just a quick one, Ruth. mentioned about that funding call that's about to come out. Is that for UK academics only, or is it for, if we're from Ireland, so would you be able to apply for that?
Yes, I was just thinking about that earlier. I'm not sure. It would be under the normal conditions of the Natural Environment Research Council and the equivalent funders. So yes, we'd have to find out whether that does apply.